Joel here with Dissecting DIY, and today we're going to go over a product called EMP Shield. This is a surge suppression device for the whole house. I initially heard about them here and there. I never really took them too seriously in the beginning, and then of course I started, there were just some news articles that came up, especially everything with COVID. You have time to read. So let's just go over EMP Shield as a company first, and then I'll go over the things that got me into it, and then I'll kind of bring us into the install and what it's going to take. It's pretty simple. I'll just kind of give you a preview of what you're going to see. So getting into it, this is EMP Shield. You can see all through here they have all these different things to protect, everything from home, vehicle, even to radio. I'm not sure who uses UHF, VHF, but it is still something that's used, just more digital. That being said, so I ended up purchasing a home protector. The home protector for me was, we're not affiliated with them in any way, so we did end up paying the full price minus the coupon code that we were able to get off a coupon site. It was about $359, and I think we saved $40, and we ended up getting it for like $319. Some things that you're going to need to purchase. To attach it to the panel, I did purchase a PVC 1/2 inch for underground. You could use different PVC if you'd like, but because it was gray, I just kind of clung to that. I ended up getting like a little elbow piece that I ended up cutting. And then of course the little 1/2 inch threaded connector, and then a 1/2 inch nut for basically connecting it into the panel. You're also going to want to attach screws to the wall just so it's secure. I don't really like things wobbling around. We also picked up a month later, I was talking to my wife, and she was asking about the solar system that we just got. So we have Tesla Solar now, and she wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to get solar protection, and that if heaven forbid something like that did happen and it does work, we are kind of going into it where we would like to insure it against any type of surge. We were able to find one. Now, as you can see, the options here are plenty, and you're going to need to know which one to get. So you're going to want to call EMP Shield directly if you do have a solar system. Talk to them about your solar system, and then of course make sure that you get the right one. We actually ended up needing, I think it was, that one looks too expensive, EMP Shield for large. So we needed this one here. And we ended up looking at the inverter, talking to EMP Shield, and gave the max ratings that was able to get, and then they guided us this direction. One of the things we asked, because we did go with Tesla, excuse me, it was just, is this going to void my warranty? Is this? And they said, no, it's a passive device. It won't void any warranties at all. But of course, it's one thing to hear from that company. You want to hear from the horse's mouth. So we did end up calling Tesla. Tesla said, there's not really a policy that they could find on it, but at the same time, they said, no, something like this, you're trying to protect the system. We're not gonna. They said not to worry about it, and of course, I'm not going to worry about it if Tesla tells me that. But then at the same time, sometimes you worry, did I get the right guy? So, did I get the guy that knew enough to advise me enough? Because down the road, if they want to void a warranty, but he told me not to worry about it. Their calls are recorded and monitored, so I'm sure I'll be fine. That being said, what got me interested in this? So I already have a whole home surge suppressor on my panel, and it's something that Mike Holmes used to recommend. And when we saw this, we said, I'm going to look into it. So this is a one-off device with a lightning strike, or they said that during DHS and Homeland Security testing, whatever facility that they use, they were able to hit it like 42 times, and they kept going. So with EMPs, it's basically, so one of the things that we were researching to make sure that it wasn't just snake oil was essentially they explained how an EMP works. Is that first initial E1 jolt from gamma rays hitting the atmosphere, ionizing the atmosphere, creating that charge that is basically destroying everything. And that happens within a nanosecond, and theirs responds under that nanosecond to basically monitor that buildup. And then there's E2, which I believe they said, I'm paraphrasing, but they said it takes anywhere from, I think it was a few seconds or even a few minutes after that initial gamma ray burst, or that that burst that's actually ionizing or affecting the atmosphere. And then comes the atmosphere is going to remain in that charged state for approximately 8 to 9 hours, they said, and then that would be the E3 part that you're protected against. So how, if it's all in the air and it can get through everything and you don't have a Faraday cage, does it protect? Well, they explained your home, any of the wires in your home is going to act like an antenna. And once that charge starts building up, it's going to run along, and that's what's actually going to destroy. That's how it happens very quickly. And that's what actually ends up destroying everything. It destroys your fridge, your boiler, all the things that you could possibly need, and then of course the grid. And we'll get into that later in a second. I found an article. It dives into a little bit of politics. I don't really like politics on this channel. I don't want to get into it, but it was all I could find. So the United States. So is this threat credible? Yeah, it turns out it is credible. So per Forbes is a site that I consider credible in terms of reporting. It's been on CNN, MSNBC. But China has a first strike capability weapon of using an EMP. Basically, they detonate it over the United States, a nuclear weapon, and this would cause the very effect of an EMP pulse, and that would be enough to knock out our electricity. We realized this back, I believe, in 1963 when we did a test in space over the Pacific, and it affected Hawaii, which was 900 miles away. And then, of course, there's stuff as early as 1899, coronal mass ejection from the sun while we were using the telegraph caused a great deal of problems. It even shocked some people. So it can have huge effects. So it's surprising that we haven't found a way to protect all of our devices and all of our things until 2020. But China does have this weapon. They have threatened to use it if the United States kept being a problem. They made a direct threat, apparently, to the United States. And, of course, the United States looked into the credibility of that. And, yes, it was... What is that? So of course, you know... Look at who's advertising for this. But anyways, so yeah, the threat was credible, and they sought to do something about it. So in 2019, it apparently an executive order was signed to protect the grid and America's crucial infrastructure. Again, very surprising that it took this long to actually take this seriously, because they've been talking about this since I was in the military, and they used to talk about this. But I mean, then it was just like rumor, conjecture. You know, some higher ups would bring it up, but you know, it wasn't anything that we seriously considered. But of course, in 20 years since I've been in, technology can progress. So, you know, that's kind of why I got into it. Looked into it. They do exceed military standards in terms of protection. And, you know, why not just have it on your house? At the minimum, it's going to protect you from a lightning strike. If a CME happens, it's going to protect all the stuff in your home. You got to understand that if something like this were to happen and the grid was protected and they were able to get it back up fairly quickly, now everything in your home's fried. Your computers, your boiler to keep your place warm, or your furnace or your air conditioning system to keep your place warm and cool, gone. Your refrigerator, gone. You know, all those things. And these guys can protect not just the home, your RV, your vehicles, everything else. It's like, if you could go on as if nothing happened, why not do it? And it's a little insurance policy, a lot different than back in the day of the 1960s during the Cold War, of, you know, people having to build bunkers. And, you know, and that was a serious threat. It was legit. And people built bunkers. So to simply attach a device to the valuables that I have in order to protect it to keep on going. And then, of course, I have solar and power walls, so the AC side is protected, and I'm going to protect the DC side. Everyone's telling me that panels, if they get hit, they're typically unaffected. It's what's at the end, the inverter, that would be affected. And that's what we need to protect. So what does it take to install one of these? Let's take a look. So here you see here, this is the instructions that come along with the EMP Shield. This is for a single phase and 3-phase installation. You're going to notice, don't look at this. See this? Don't look at that, because sometimes the neutral will come into a bar like that. So most homes, if you're just a regular homeowner and you don't have anything more than a 200 amp service, you're going to have the single phase service. You just want to watch what comes in. Just watch these wires. So you're going to have a black, a red and a black wire, a red and a white wire that will go to a neutral bar, and then of course you'll have this aluminum wire, braided wire, that goes over to your ground. Some panels do share the neutral and the ground, so something to be aware of. You may not have, that might not be separated. So yeah, that's basically it. And then of course you have the EMP Shield. L1 and L2 is going to be on a 20 amp breaker, so if you do have a breaker, also it has to be at the top of the panel, it has to be at the beginning of the circuit. They do recommend that, so notice where the wire is at the very top here, and then of course the ground, basically at the beginning of the leg, and then the breaker at the very top near where the power comes in. So something to be aware of. That's what they recommend, and that's what you should do. If you do have to move to, move them to the bottom, but definitely follow that recommendation, because lightning strike, EMP or CME, you want to be protected. You spent the money on it, you might as well get it protected. So that's it for this video of kind of the building up to the install. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out a old or a whole home surge suppression device that I was using that isn't rated for an EMP, and I'm putting in this place the EMP Shield. Now EMP Shield said that I could leave that in, but again, I need to get it at the beginning of the circuit. I don't feel like messing around with my panel too much. And then of course I will also down the road make a video whenever I get the DC side and show you how to install it in the inverters. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but let's go get it. Alright, for today's install video, you will obviously need an EMP Shield, wire strippers and cutters, robust Phillips head and flathead screwdriver, a 20 amp breaker, a 1/2 inch connector and underground conduit, as well as metal nuts for the 1/2 inch portion to connect to the panel. We are going to be removing an old or another surge protector and placing this in its place. Alright, so the main breaker we're going to be replacing today is here. We're going to replace that with a 20 amp breaker. The old surge device we're replacing is here. That is of course attached to the breaker. I'm going to shut the main power off here, and the ground wire, ground block was moved by Tesla to be above that, so we're going to have to run the wire there. The neutral bar is on the right, and then of course all the power is behind that breaker. Now these are my old these are the sense sensors that you're looking at there, but you're going to see a black wire, a black and red wire, and the middle wire you're seeing coming in is a black and white wire. That is my neutral, and then of course the aluminum looking wire, the ground block there, that's the ground. So unfortunately everything is in front, that wire is in front of all the screws, so I'm going to have to remove that wire. That can be a lot of fun. Alright, so unfortunately you're going to see the back of my head a lot here. There was nothing I could do with the camera angle. I do try to improve it as I go along. The first thing that we're going to do is ensure that the power is off. Once we know that the power is off, the main breaker's off, we're going to start removing that bolt that's holding in the surge suppressor into the panel. Now this wasn't screwed in, so it's just one nut holding everything in place. And it can take some time. You see I'm jamming it down to kind of loosen it up, and that works Alright, here I'm just loosening the wires to the breaker itself. That's a black and a red wire that you're going to be focused on. You just want to loosen up all the wires. The electrician that I had install this put the neutral actually towards the bottom of the circuit, so this wouldn't have been an effective surge suppressor, because everything is supposed to be at the beginning of the circuit before it can even interact with anything else. You want to get that electricity away from all those circuits. It's something they recommend. Here I'm trying to pry it out. You're going to notice that as I pry it out, I actually loosen other breakers. And maybe they just weren't in there good to begin with, but you just want to make sure that anytime you mess around a panel, all the breakers, everything needs to be checked to make sure that it's safe, and of course that everything's going to work in your home. Now you're going to see here that I'm going to have to remove the ground wire. This is a secondary panel now because it's everything's fed to the main panels outside, or the solar system. Now I'm just going to remove this wire so I can get access to the screws. And again, this is a really stupid design, or a stupid thing that they did, but at the same time they had no other choice. There's just no other room in the panel for them to have done this. So I get why they did it, but at the same time, something fairly simple becomes complicated, because this wire is braided, and of course it can become frayed, and the port or hole that it goes into is you have to be right on the money in terms of making sure that it goes all the way through, and of course is grounded correctly. So this took me some time. This was a pain in the butt. This is something you want to prepare for, because if you're not used to this problem, it will become a problem. And then of course getting that wire back in is going to take some doing. Just to, take your time, be patient, and again, this is why we always triple check, because with that ground out of there, nothing's grounded now. So, but that's the old. Now I start here by running the wires in the existing hole that was already there from the other device. Now remember, I've pre-fit the EMP shield to utilize this method by using an underground conduit gray that was about a 1/2 inch, and then I used the threaded end cap so I can just do what I did with the old surge suppressor. Now this does give me some problems fishing it in, because there's all these wires in the way, and I just end up having to electrical tape it. So here I'm just showing you, I'm going to electrical tape the end just to make this a little bit easier, and it goes right in, makes it a cinch. And this is going to help you. I know I'm supposed to hold everything up in front of the camera, but the camera angle, everything is just so skewed just because of the small working space. And I actually had a wide angle lens and was hoping to have a little bit more detail. And of course here I'm just grabbing the 1/2 inch nut that I can use to secure the EMP shield in place, and this will help keep it attached to the panel. And then I'm also going to add some screws to the side just to make sure that it's secured properly. Lining this up can be quite a hassle, especially with all these wires in the way. You want to try to move them as best you can, and you just want to make sure that you just take your time, because it can be really frustrating. Here I had to remove a couple breakers just so I can get my hand in there and line the threads up with the nut, and then once I had done that, it went right in. And there's a space behind the EMP shield, and I did have to solve for that with a 1/2 inch piece of plywood. So here I'm just lining up the 1/2 inch piece of plywood. Actually, the piece of plywood that this is attached to is about 1/2 inch as well. So that gives me about 1 inch. So I used 1-inch drywall screws, just so you're aware. So if you have a panel that's, you can see the nails, they just kind of nailed in that board, you're not going to have a lot of space behind that. You don't want to have to snip the nails. So just buy some 1-inch drywall screws. Now here I'm going to backtrack through my work. Once I know that this nut is tight, I'm going to reinstall all the breakers that I touched, and then I'm going to check all the ones that I think look loose. If you want, you can go down every single one, you can check, but some of them are loose there, and you really just have to double check for that. So here I was actually going to make the same mistake that the last electrician did, and then I remembered, oh my god, I don't want to put it down here. So I ended up moving that back above the breaker later on, but you always want to leave a little bit of excess in case there's a future panel upgrade, there's just some type of technology you're not anticipating, and you want to, just some service length, so you can actually service the panel down in the future. And that's what I do here. I take about a little bit more than 1/4 inch off at the end, and then of course I twist it all just to make sure that it's going to fit in that panel. So I cut it to length. I'm going to strip the wire, and then once the wire is stripped, I'm just going to turn those wires on the end. You can use linesman pliers to turn, or you can use your fingers. I like the linesman pliers because you get a tighter, basically it's just all tighter, and it doesn't like loosen up really easily. So I'm going to cut the ground here, and I'll get that ground installed. So here I'm just adjusting the camera so you can see what I'm doing. I got that ground wire in. Unfortunately, you didn't see me do it because I didn't realize the camera was pointing down. So now I'm just going to try to get this. This is that frustration that I was talking about. It was quite difficult to get this back in, and I really had to make sure that everything was nice and tight, and make sure that I had a good ground. Basically, you must make sure that your ground is in there, that the screw that's holding it in is tight, and that it's got a good contact with everything. Now here's me placing that neutral wire towards the top of the panel, like I said earlier. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the black and red wire to the existing or to the new 20 amp breaker. So I'm just going to put this on the neutral bar, and we'll go from there. Now here I'm putting some of that service length in that I need, that service loop, whatever you want to call it. So in case I ever need to service the panel, or I need to move things around, that there's some extra wire in there. And you don't need a lot, but you need to plan ahead where it can at least make it down the length of that panel if need be. Sometimes as technology upgrades over the years, there could be a surge suppressor that becomes part of the 200 amp switch. You're not going to need that block at the top, so you might be able to move some circuits around, things like that, and that's stuff I like to plan for. All right, so now we're just going to flip the breaker on. We're going to make sure that the 2 lights come on EMP Shield. You can see that my one of the wire communication wires is there. So I turn it on, I move the camera, and you can see L1 and L2 are lit. We're good to go. This thing's all set, and you are now protected from, at a minimum, a lightning strike, and at the worst, an EMP. Alright everyone, that's the video on how to install EMP Shield. As you can see, pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Again, if you don't know what you're doing, this video is for entertainment purposes only. You should always hire a licensed electrician, someone that knows what they're doing. And if you have no idea how to deal with these things and you think you're not handy enough, you can't mess around a panel. It's if you don't know what you're doing, you can get shocked, hurt, or worse, you could die. I don't want that to happen. So again, this video is for entertainment purposes only. You take on these projects at your own risk, and if you don't know what you're doing, just hire a licensed professional. But that was EMP Shield. We're going to look into getting some vehicle protection. We do have some DC protection. So it's funny, I was talking to my brother and a couple of friends about this, and they were all laughing, and they were like, oh, if an EMP goes off, we're all screwed, like nothing's going to happen. Well, the thing is, the military has the technology to suppress EMPs. At least we assume they do, right? So why not have that on our side, the civilian side? So you got to think, if something like this were to ever happen, say they insulate the grid and they have the power back up in a few days, a couple weeks, a month, right? You're going to need a fridge, you're going to need your boiler, you're going to need all the things that you relied on before, and unfortunately, if they weren't protected, they're going to be fried. You're going to need circuit boards for your boiler or your furnace. You're going to need replacement phones. Well, of course, with phones, if it's not on the charger, it's not protected. You're going to need a refrigerator. You're going to need all these things that you rely on. If you're on a well, or all the components that pump stuff through your home, like for your boiler. Guys, all that stuff is typically made in the country that threatened to hit us with an EMP, and so not only is the supply and demand going to be high, you may not necessarily be able to get it. So why not just insure it? Why not protect it? At the minimum, from a lightning strike. At the worst, from an EMP or a coronal mass ejection, which is probably more likely anyways. So for me, I have solar, so if this were to go off and all went well, and this product does what it says, I'm gonna have my solar, I'm gonna have power, I'm gonna have water, I'm gonna have an ability to keep the existing food I have left cool, and I'm gonna be all right for a while. It's an insurance policy that, why not have it? That's my thoughts on it anyways. I know a lot of people are iffy about it. If I get one for my vehicle, I can still get around, say to a hospital. Hospitals are pretty well protected. I hope that they're protected against these things. I can still be mobile with the remaining gas I have. I can still get around. Anyways, it's kind of a neat thing. Like, I'm glad I kind of stumbled upon those articles and started looking into it and found this product, because I not only get to show you about it, maybe it's going to help you, and maybe you're able to install it, and at the worst, at a minimum, you protect your house from a lightning strike. Hopefully this comes in handy someday, and hopefully you never need it. Guys, I know that the camera angle sucked. I did try making it a little bit better for you guys, but just the small spaces and getting all, big bulky camera equipment in can be tough. So if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated the video, give it a thumbs down. Tell me what you think.